library.
Chapter 1. The invisible currency nobody talks about. Your biggest financial decisions aren't made with your brain. They're made with your emotions, and nobody told you that. You're sitting across from someone. They just offered you a deal that looks perfect on paper. Your analytical mind is doing backflips, the numbers align, the opportunity is real. But something inside you says no. You can't explain it. You just feel it. So you walk away. 6 months later, you find out the person who said yes is now broke, and you just dodged a bullet that would have shattered you. This is emotional intelligence working, not against you, for you. Here's what most ambitious people get wrong. They believe that money is a math game. They think success is about having the sharpest analytical mind in the room, so they study numbers, build spreadsheets, memorize formulas. And yes, you need that. But the people who truly build lasting wealth, who make decisions they don't regret, who build genuine influence and relationships that matter, they're playing a completely different game. They're mastering the invisible game, the game nobody sees, the game of emotions. Travis Bradberry spent decades researching this. His work with thousands of high performers revealed something simple but radical. The people earning 7 figures weren't necessarily the smartest. They weren't always the ones with the most degrees on the wall. But almost every single one of them had one thing in common. They understood themselves. They understood why they did what they did. They could read other people like most of us read our phones. And when emotions flared up, they didn't get swept away by them. They used them. Think about this. Every financial mistake you've ever made, trace it back. Not to lack of information. Trace it back to an emotional moment. Maybe it was fear. You sold a stock at the exact wrong time because you panicked. Or it was greed. You chased a trend everyone was talking about and lost money when it crashed. Or it was pride. You wouldn't admit you were wrong, so you doubled down and it got worse. These aren't intellectual failures. They're emotional ones. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? It's not about being nice. It's not about meditation and feeling peaceful all day. That's a misunderstanding that costs people millions. Emotional intelligence is cold. It's practical. It's about recognizing what you're feeling right now, understanding why you're feeling it, and then choosing what to do about it. That's the power, the choice. Most people feel an emotion and immediately become a passenger in their own life. Emotionally intelligent people feel the emotion and stay the driver. Let me give you a real example. 2 entrepreneurs, same market, same resources, same starting point. One of them gets rejected by a potential investor. The emotion hits: rejection, failure, doubt. They feel it intensely. But here's where the split happens. One person spirals. They interpret that rejection as proof they're not good enough. Their fear takes over. They start making conservative decisions. They pull back. 5 years later, they're still small. The other person feels the exact same rejection, exact same sting, but they do something different. They pause. They ask themselves what that rejection actually means. Maybe the investor had different priorities. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe there's a lesson here. They feel the emotion fully. They learn from it. They move forward, and their business grows exponentially. Same emotion, different intelligence. That's the difference emotional intelligence makes. Here's something that will shift your perspective. Every emotion you feel exists for a reason. It's not a bug in your system. It's a feature. Fear is trying to protect you from danger. Anger is telling you someone crossed a boundary. Sadness is processing loss. Excitement is pointing you toward possibility. The problem isn't that you feel these things. The problem is you don't understand what they're saying. So you either suppress them, which costs you enormous energy, or you let them control you, which costs you everything. The wealthiest people I've studied have developed something like a personal early warning system. They've learned to recognize their emotional patterns before they make decisions. One founder told me something I'll never forget. He said he made it a rule never to make a business decision when he was tired, hungry, or emotional. Not emotional in general, but at a heightened level of emotion. Because he knew himself. He knew that at 11 p.m. after a 15-hour day, when his blood sugar was crashing and someone was pushing him to sign something, his decision-making was compromised. So he protected himself. He built a system that honored his humanity instead of fighting it. That's emotional intelligence applied to real life. It's not mystical. It's practical wisdom. Think about your current situation, whatever you're trying to build, whatever you're trying to achieve. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it. How much of your progress has been limited by understanding other people's emotions wrong? Maybe you alienated someone who could have helped you. Maybe you misread a situation and acted defensively when you should have been vulnerable. Maybe you hurt someone you cared about because you were projecting your own fears onto them. These aren't small things. These ripple effects compound over years. The new emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing who you are. It's about becoming more of who you're capable of being. It's about walking into a negotiation and actually understanding what the other person cares about, not what they say they care about, what they actually care about. It's about recognizing when someone is lying to you, not because you're suspicious of everyone, but because you can read the gap between what they're saying and what they're feeling. It's about catching yourself before you make a decision you'll regret. It's about staying calm when everyone around you is panicking. It's about having the self-awareness to know when to lead and when to listen. These skills are worth fortunes. And here's the beautiful part. They're not things you're born with or without. They're learnable. They're developable. They're absolutely within reach if you understand the architecture of how emotions actually work and what they're trying to tell you. This chapter is just the foundation. We're establishing why this matters, why emotional intelligence isn't soft, why it's the hardest currency to develop, and also the most valuable thing you can own. In the chapters ahead, we're going deeper. We're looking at how to actually develop these skills, how to read yourself, how to read others, how to stay composed when the pressure is on, how to turn emotions into advantages instead of liabilities. But right now, I want to leave you with this. Every major regret in your life can be traced back to an emotional moment you didn't handle well. Every major victory can be traced back to an emotional moment you handled beautifully. You're not going to eliminate emotions. You're not going to become a robot. But you can become someone who understands emotions the way a chess master understands the board. With clarity, with purpose, with power. That's what we're building together. Chapter 2. Reading yourself before you read the room. Most people live their entire lives as strangers to themselves. They wake up, they react, they make decisions. They wonder why the same patterns keep happening, over and over. The same relationship failures, the same financial mistakes, the same career setbacks. Then they blame external circumstances, the economy, bad luck, other people. But the real culprit is somewhere else entirely. You cannot master what you do not see. Right now, you're operating with blind spots you don't even know exist. You think you know why you do what you do, but most of your actual motivations are running beneath consciousness. They're autopilot. And autopilot is expensive when you're trying to build something real. The second layer of emotional intelligence is what we call self-awareness. Not the Instagram version of self-awareness where you post about your flaws. Real self-awareness. The kind that changes behavior. The kind that costs money when you don't have it and makes money when you do. Here's what research keeps showing us. The people who have genuine self-awareness earn more money. They have better relationships. They advance faster in their careers. Not because they're more talented, not because they're luckier, but because they know themselves. They understand the gap between how they think they are and how they actually are. And that gap is enormous for most people. Let me ask you something specific. When was the last time someone gave you honest feedback and you actually listened instead of defending yourself? Not recently is my guess. That's the pattern. We ask for feedback, someone gives it to us, we immediately find reasons why it's wrong or not applicable to us. We protect our self-image at all costs, and in doing that, we lock ourselves into the same patterns that are holding us back. A client came to me once, successful entrepreneur, built 3 companies, made real money, but his relationships were imploding. His third business partner had just walked away. His wife was considering leaving him. He couldn't understand why. In his mind, he was the hard-working one, the visionary. Everyone else was the problem. So we dug deeper. I asked him a simple question. What would your ex-business partners say about you if I called them right now? He got defensive immediately, started explaining why they were wrong about him. Then he paused, and something shifted. He said, "They'd probably say I don't listen, that I steamroll over people, that I assume I'm right." That moment was worth millions to him, because once he saw himself accurately, he could change. Not in theory, in practice. Within a year, his relationships were healing. His new partnerships were stronger. His revenues doubled. All because he finally saw himself. So how do you develop this? How do you actually see yourself? First, you have to understand your emotional triggers. These are the situations that bypass your conscious mind and immediately put you into reaction mode. For some people, it's criticism. They hear feedback and their nervous system goes into fight mode. For others, it's rejection. Someone says no and they feel like they're 5 years old again. For others, it's feeling powerless. If they can't control a situation, their anxiety spikes. The trigger is different for everyone, but almost everyone has one. You need to know yours, not as a theory, as a lived reality. Because once you know what triggers you, you can manage it. Without that knowledge, you are at its mercy. Here's an exercise that works. Think about the last 3 times you overreacted to something. Not when you logically handled it well, when you lost it, yelled at someone, made a harsh decision, withdrew from someone you care about. Write down what happened before the reaction. What was the trigger? Not the surface situation, the actual trigger, the feeling underneath. One person I worked with realized her trigger was being corrected in front of others. She didn't consciously know this, but every time it happened, she'd get defensive, argumentative, sometimes even hostile. Once she saw the pattern, she could address it. She could prepare herself. When someone corrected her in a meeting, instead of going into defense mode, she could pause and recognize the feeling of shame. Then she could choose her response instead of being controlled by it. Same situation, different outcome. That shift alone transformed how her team saw her. But triggers are only the surface. Underneath triggers are beliefs. Deep beliefs about who you are and what you deserve. These beliefs were mostly installed when you were young. Someone told you that you weren't smart enough, or you were too loud, or you were selfish. You believed them. And now, decades later, you're still operating from those instructions that were given to you by people who didn't actually know you. These beliefs show up everywhere, in how you negotiate, in how you network, in how you ask for money, in how you handle failure. One founder was terrified to raise capital. She had the business, she had the track record, but when it came time to pitch investors, she froze. She undersold herself. She accepted less money than she should have. What was happening underneath was a belief she inherited from her family that wanting money meant being greedy, that ambition was somehow unfeminine. So she was sabotaging herself to maintain an identity that no longer served her. Once she saw that belief, once she questioned whether it was actually true, she could release it. The next round of funding, she asked for what she was actually worth. She got it. This is how self-awareness works. You feel something, you notice it, you don't judge it, you ask what belief is underneath it. Then you ask whether that belief is actually true. Your values are another critical piece of self-awareness. Not the values you think you have, the values you actually live by. There's almost always a gap. You say you value family, but you work 80 hours a week. You say you value health, but you haven't worked out in months. You say you value integrity, but you cut corners on that project when no one was looking. These gaps create internal conflict. They drain your energy. They make you feel like you're living someone else's life. One executive realized his stated values and actual values were completely misaligned. He said he valued creativity and innovation, but his actual decisions prioritized safety and predictability. His team was frustrated. He was frustrated. Nothing was exciting anymore. Nothing was moving forward. Once he admitted his real values to himself, everything shifted. He stopped trying to be someone he wasn't. He started building from where he actually was. The energy changed. The results changed. Here's what matters. You have to know yourself well enough to either align your life with your real values or to consciously choose different values. But you cannot keep pretending. That pretending is costing you everything. Self-awareness also means understanding your emotional range. How do you typically respond under pressure? Do you withdraw? Do you become aggressive? Do you shut down? Do you hyperanalyze? Do you make impulsive decisions? Most people have a pattern. They think they're more flexible than they actually are, but under real pressure, they revert to type. I worked with a CEO who thought he was a calm decision maker, but when crisis hit, he was asking for immediate action on incomplete information, panic mode. His team would follow his lead into panic. Later, when things settled, he'd realize his rushed decisions had created more problems. Once he understood his pattern, he built a system to protect himself from it. During a crisis, he'd deliberately slow down. He'd ask his team to give him time before demanding decisions. He created space between impulse and action. That space was where wisdom lived. You need that space too. The space between what you feel and what you do. That's where emotional intelligence becomes power. The most practical thing you can do right now is start noticing. Notice what you feel. Notice when you react versus respond. Notice the gap between how you see yourself and how others seem to see you. Keep it simple. You don't need a therapist or a journal with perfect insights. Just notice, because observation is the first step to change. You cannot change what you do not see. Start today. One moment, one feeling, one trigger. Write it down. Ask yourself why. That's enough. Because once you start seeing yourself accurately, everything else becomes possible. Your relationships improve because you're not projecting your insecurities onto them anymore. Your business improves because you're making decisions from clarity instead of fear. Your money improves because you're not sabotaging yourself with self-limiting beliefs anymore. Self-awareness isn't weak. It's the strongest foundation you can build. You're sitting across from someone. They're telling you they're interested in your proposal. Their words are positive, but you feel something off, something underneath the words that doesn't match. You can't quite name it, but you know, instinctively, something is wrong. That instinct is emotional intelligence reading the room. That's the skill we're developing now. Most communication is not verbal. This is not new information, but almost nobody actually acts on it. We listen to words, we hear the content, we respond to the literal message, and we miss everything that actually matters. When you're trying to build wealth, when you're trying to influence people, when you're trying to negotiate or lead or persuade, you're playing a game that's almost entirely nonverbal. The person across from you is sending signals constantly through their face, their posture, their tone, their breathing, the pace of their speech, their eyes. All of this is information, real information. The kind of information that tells you what someone actually thinks and feels, not what they want you to think they think and feel. The problem is most people were never taught to read this language, so they don't. They're blind to it. And that blindness costs them negotiations. It costs them relationships. It costs them money. Let me tell you about a negotiation I watched. Two people. One was buying a business, one was selling. On the surface, everything looked fine. The seller was smiling, making eye contact, saying all the right things. But his shoulders were tensed up around his ears. His jaw was clenched. He was speaking slightly faster than normal. And when he talked about the financials, his pupils dilated just barely. These are stress signals. This person was anxious, probably hiding something. The buyer didn't notice any of this, didn't read any of it. He accepted the seller's verbal reassurances at face value. 6 months later, discovered the books had been manipulated. The business was in trouble. He'd been misled, and it cost him hundreds of thousands. The information was there the whole time, written in the seller's body, but the buyer wasn't literate in that language. Here's what you need to know. People lie with their words constantly. It's easy. They've practiced it. They can rehearse the perfect pitch. They can say what they know you want to hear, but their bodies don't lie, not the same way. Their autonomic nervous system gives them away. When someone is stressed, their pupils dilate. When someone is excited, their breathing changes. When someone is lying, there's usually a micro-expression that flashes across their face for a fraction of a second. It's the real feeling showing through before the social mask comes back on. Most of us are trained from childhood to ignore these signals. We're taught to be polite, to believe what people say, to not be suspicious. This is terrible training if you're trying to succeed, because politeness and naivete are expensive. One successful investor told me his method was simple. He didn't trust what people said about their business. He watched how they talked about it. If they lit up, if their energy shifted, if they started leaning forward, if their voice became more animated, that told him they believed in what they were saying. If they went flat, if they became defensive, if they started using corporate jargon instead of speaking naturally, he knew something was off. He'd pull back, he'd ask harder questions, and usually he'd discover the problem before he invested. This is reading emotional data. It's not magic, it's observation, and it's a learnable skill. Start with the eyes. Eyes are the most honest part of a person's face. When someone is genuinely happy, their eyes crinkle at the corners. It's called a Duchenne smile. The fake smile, the polite smile, it only uses the mouth. The real smile uses the whole face. You can tell the difference instantly once you know to look for it. When someone is interested in what you're saying, their pupils dilate. When they're disengaging, their pupils constrict. When someone is uncomfortable, they usually look away. When someone is confident, they hold your gaze steadily, not aggressively, just steadily. These are baseline observations. Learn them. Then watch the body. When people are stressed or anxious, they engage in what's called self-soothing behaviors. They touch their face, they clasp their hands, they cross their arms, they shift their weight, they rock slightly. These aren't big, dramatic things. They're subtle, but they're constant. Once you start noticing them, you'll see them everywhere. A person says they're confident about a deal, but they're gripping the armrest of their chair. That's stress. A person says they're not worried about the timeline, but they're bouncing their legs slightly. That's anxiety leaking out. The words say one thing, the body says another. Believe the body. Breathing is also incredibly revealing. When people are calm, their breathing is slow and deep. When they're stressed, it becomes shallow and rapid. When someone is lying or hiding something, you'll sometimes notice them holding their breath for a moment before answering. It's a split-second hesitation while they formulate the lie. Natural truth comes out faster because it doesn't require construction. Deception requires thinking. That thinking shows up in the timing, in the breath, in the pause before the words come out. Tone of voice matters more than the words themselves. The same sentence can mean completely different things depending on how it's delivered. I want to do this project. Said with genuine excitement, it means something. Said flatly, it means something entirely different. Said with a slight laugh, it might mean they're nervous. You have to listen with your whole system, not just your ears. your entire being picking up on the energy underneath the words. Here's where this becomes practical for you. In your next negotiation, instead of focusing on the pitch, focus on the person. Watch what happens when you mention money. Does their energy shift? Do they become guarded? Do they light up? Does their body relax or tense? That tells you something true about whether they actually want this or whether they're just going through the motions. When you're hiring someone, forget the resume for a moment. Watch them. When they talk about their previous role, do they speak about it with satisfaction or resentment? When they talk about the position you're offering, do they seem genuinely interested or are they just trying to seem interested? Can you feel the difference? That difference is everything because energy is contagious. If you hire someone who's just going through the motions, that energy spreads. There's also something called mirroring. When people are comfortable with each other, they unconsciously mirror each other's body language. They sit the same way. They gesture similarly. Their cadence matches. If you're in a negotiation and the other person is mirroring you, that's a good sign. They're engaged. They're connected. If they're not mirroring, if they're pointedly different in their positioning, they might be creating distance. They might be signaling that they don't want this deal or this relationship. You can use mirroring intentionally too. If you subtly match someone's posture or pace of speech, it creates rapport. Not obviously, not in a weird way, just natural alignment, and people feel that. They feel more comfortable, more connected, more likely to say yes. But here's the critical thing. All of this observation only works if you're coming from curiosity, not judgment. If you're reading someone to manipulate them, they'll feel that energy and they'll shut down. The best readers of people are the ones who are genuinely curious about what someone else is thinking and feeling, who ask questions from a place of wanting to understand, not wanting to win. Paradoxically, that curiosity makes you more effective, not less. One more thing. As you develop this skill, you'll start noticing incongruence more and more. That's when someone's words don't match their emotions. Their body language doesn't match their message. Their stated values don't match their actions. Incongruence is an alarm bell, not always meaning something nefarious, but meaning something worth investigating. Someone might say they're excited about a project, but their body is saying they're terrified. That's worth exploring, because that person is probably going to sabotage the project even unconsciously, because they're not actually aligned with it. The gift of reading others is that you stop wasting time and energy on people and situations that aren't right. You start trusting your instincts. You start making faster decisions because you're getting more complete information. You start building relationships with people who are genuinely aligned with you, instead of people who are just telling you what you want to hear. This is power. The kind of power that compounds over years. Every negotiation you read better. Every hire you make better. Every partnership you build with more genuine alignment. These small shifts add up to enormous differences in outcomes. Start noticing today. Not in a creepy way, just with genuine curiosity. What is this person really feeling right now? Not what are they saying, what are they feeling? Once you start asking that question, the whole world becomes more readable. And a more readable world is a world where you can move with confidence. Chapter 4. The Pressure Test. When everything falls apart and you stay whole. Real emotional intelligence doesn't show up when everything is going well. It shows up when everything is falling apart and you have to decide who you're going to be in that moment. You know the feeling. The call comes in, the deal collapses, the market drops, someone betrays you, your business is bleeding money, your relationship is ending. The pressure hits and something shifts inside you. Your nervous system goes into overdrive, your thoughts get scattered, your body tenses, and in that moment, you have a choice. Most people don't realize they have a choice. They think they're just reacting. They think the pressure is controlling them, but it's not. You're in control, if you know how to be. This is where emotional intelligence separates the people who build real wealth from the people who lose it. I watched a founder go through a crisis. His main client left, represented 40% of his revenue, Gone, overnight. The panic should have been normal. It was justified. His employees were counting on him. He was counting on the revenue. But instead of spiraling into panic, he did something different. He stopped, literally paused everything for an hour. He didn't start frantically pitching new clients. He didn't call his team in a panic. He sat with the emotion first. He felt the fear. He let it be there without fighting it. And then he asks himself a simple question. What do I actually know right now versus what am I imagining? What he knew. He had 1 month of runway before things got critical. He had a skilled team. He had a track record. He had clients who liked his work. What he was imagining. That this one loss meant everything was over, that he'd lose all his clients, that he'd have to shut down, that he was a failure. Once he separated the real from the imagined, the pressure felt different. Not gone, but manageable. He had a month. In a month, he could make things happen. So that's what he did. He came back to his team clear and calm, not pretending things were fine, just clear about the reality and clear about the next steps. His team felt that calm, and instead of panicking, they got to work. Within 6 weeks, they had 2 new clients that more than replaced the lost revenue. He came through the pressure stronger, not despite the pressure, because of how he handled it. This is a learnable skill. It's not about being naturally calm. Some of the most successful people I know are high-strung. They feel things intensely. They get activated easily. But they've learned to manage the activation. They've learned to slow down their nervous system on demand. Here's how pressure affects your brain. When you're under stress, your amygdala activates. That's the part that handles fear and threat. It floods your system with cortisol. Your thinking becomes more primitive. You either fight, flee, or freeze. You're not thinking clearly anymore. You're in survival mode. And survival mode is not where good decisions live. It's not where creativity lives. It's not where wisdom lives. So the first thing you need to do is calm your nervous system. Get out of that threat response. The fastest way to do this is breathing. Not meditation, not therapy. Breathing. Your nervous system is directly connected to your breathing. When you're stressed, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. When you slow your breathing down, your nervous system follows. It has to. It's biology. The specific technique is called box breathing. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Breathe out for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Repeat this 5 to 10 times. It sounds simple. It is simple, but it works. Your heart rate drops. Your cortisol levels start to normalize. Your thinking clears. Within 2 minutes, you're back in your prefrontal cortex. You're thinking again instead of reacting. I taught this to a trader who was losing money because of emotional decision-making. When the market would move suddenly, he'd panic sell too early. He was leaving money on the table constantly. I told him to use box breathing before any major decision. He was skeptical. He tried it anyway. One day, the market dropped unexpectedly. His instinct was to panic sell. Instead, he did 5 rounds of box breathing, 30 seconds. In that 30 seconds, his thinking shifted. He realized this was actually a buying opportunity, not a threat. He bought instead of sold. The market recovered. He made a significant profit, all because he had the discipline to slow his breathing down before deciding. But breathing alone isn't enough. After you've calmed your nervous system, you need to think clearly about the pressure itself. Here's what most people do. They catastrophize. They take one negative event and extrapolate it into total disaster. One rejection means nobody will ever hire them. One bad quarter means the business is doomed. One argument means the relationship is over. They jump from current reality to worst-case scenario in seconds. And then they make decisions from that fearful place. Those decisions almost always make things worse. The antidote is what we call reality testing. Once your nervous system is calm, you ask yourself hard questions. What is actually true right now? Not what might be true. What is demonstrably true in this moment? Then you ask, what is the worst that could actually happen? Not what might happen. What is the realistic worst-case scenario? Then you ask, can I handle that? Usually, the answer is yes. You've handled difficult things before. You'll handle this. And once you know you can handle the worst case, the pressure immediately feels smaller. You're not fighting against the possibility anymore. You've accepted it, and you're ready for it. One executive was facing a board meeting where she might lose her position. She was terrified, catastrophizing constantly. I had her do the reality test. What is actually true? The board is concerned about quarterly numbers. That's fact. What is the realistic worst case? They ask for her resignation. She loses her job. Then I asked, can you handle that? She paused. Then she said, yes, she could get another job. She had savings. She'd be okay. It wasn't what she wanted, but she could handle it. The moment she accepted the worst case, something shifted. She walked into that board meeting calm, not nervous, not desperate, clear. She presented her strategy with confidence. She answered their tough questions honestly. And they didn't ask for her resignation. They promoted her because she had the emotional stability to handle pressure. That stability was visible, and it made all the difference. This is what separates wealthy people from everyone else. Wealthy people can sit with discomfort. They can feel the fear and not let it dictate their actions. They can be in the middle of a crisis and still think clearly. This is a skill that was developed. Nobody is born with this. It's trained, and you train it by practicing it. Here's something critical, though. Staying calm under pressure doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It means feeling them fully and then choosing your response anyway. This is the distinction that changes everything. Suppression costs energy. It builds resentment. It causes health problems. Feeling emotions fully and then choosing your action is different. You feel the fear completely. Your heart is racing, your hands are sweating, you feel it all, and then you breathe, and then you think, and then you act. The emotion is there, but you're not being run by it. One more piece. When you're under pressure, you need to make sure you're taking care of your physical baseline. When you're tired, hungry, or not moving your body, your emotional regulation capacity drops dramatically. You become more reactive, more anxious, more likely to catastrophize. So during a crisis, that's when you actually need to protect your sleep more, exercise more, eat better, not less. Your body is the foundation of your emotional intelligence. Neglect it, and your emotions become unmanageable. Take care of it, and pressure becomes manageable. I worked with a founder who was in the middle of raising capital, incredibly stressful period. He started skipping meals, sleeping 5 hours a night, not exercising. His stress levels went through the roof. He was making bad decisions in conversations with investors. He looked desperate. We reset his basics: 7 hours of sleep, 3 meals a day, 3 workouts a week. His entire demeanor changed. He had more energy. He thought more clearly. He was more persuasive, and he closed the funding round. The change wasn't in strategy. It was in his baseline physical state. So when pressure hits, and it will, remember this. First, calm your nervous system through breathing. Second, reality test the situation. Third, accept the worst case. Fourth, protect your physical baseline. Fifth, make your decision from clarity instead of fear. This is the formula. This is how you stay whole when everything around you is falling apart. The pressure itself doesn't change you. How you respond to the pressure changes you. And every time you respond well, you become more capable of responding well the next time. You're building a nervous system that can handle anything. That's what real confidence is. Not thinking bad things won't happen, knowing you can handle whatever does happen. That's where power lives. Chapter 5. The Compounding Power of Mastery. You've traveled through 4 chapters. You understand why emotional intelligence matters. You can see yourself clearly now. You're reading other people better. You're staying calm under pressure. But knowing and doing are different languages. Most people know what to do and never actually do it. They read the book, they understand the concepts, and then they go back to old patterns. nothing changes. That's not going to be you. This final chapter isn't about new information. It's about commitment. It's about understanding what happens when you actually integrate these skills into your daily life, because integration is where the money is. Integration is where the relationships transform. Integration is where you become someone different. Let me tell you what happens when emotional intelligence becomes a practice instead of just an idea. At first, nothing visible changes. You're still the same person, you still have the same business, the same relationships, the same challenges, but something internal shifts. You start noticing things you never noticed before. You catch yourself before you react. You read a situation more accurately. You make a slightly better decision. That decision compounds. A week later, you make another slightly better decision. A month later, the pattern is different. 3 months later, someone who knows you well says something like, "You seem different, calmer, more clear." They can feel it. The people around you can feel it before you can even fully articulate what's changed. Here's what I've observed. When someone genuinely commits to emotional intelligence, 3 things happen simultaneously. First, their income changes. Not because they suddenly work harder, but because they make better decisions. They don't panic sell investments at the exact wrong time. They don't take jobs out of desperation that turn out to be terrible fits. They negotiate better because they're not driven by fear. They read opportunities more accurately. They read people more accurately. All of this compounds into better financial outcomes. A client of mine increased her income by 40% within 2 years, not through changing jobs, through better decision-making in every area. Better hiring decisions, better client selection, better pricing, better resource allocation, all emotional intelligence applied. Second, their relationships improve, all of them. Not because they're trying harder to be nice, but because they're less reactive. They listen better. They're less likely to project their insecurities onto the people they care about. They can have difficult conversations without it turning into warfare. They can admit when they're wrong. They can ask for help. These are simple things, but they're revolutionary in relationships. Marriages that were on the edge stabilize and deepen. Professional relationships that were transactional become genuine. The quality of your relationships is largely determined by your emotional intelligence. There's no substitute for this. Third, they feel different internally. There's a kind of peace that comes from knowing yourself, from not being at war with yourself. You stop wasting enormous amounts of energy fighting your own patterns. You stop second-guessing yourself constantly. You stop feeling like you're living someone else's life. There's a solidity that comes with emotional integration, a groundedness. People who develop this describe it as finally feeling like themselves, like they came home. But here's what's critical. This only happens if you actually practice. Practice looks like this. Every single day, you're doing one thing. You're noticing. You're noticing what you feel. You're noticing your triggers. You're noticing other people. You're noticing your patterns. You're not judging. You're not trying to fix everything at once. You're just observing. This observation is the actual work. This is what rewires your nervous system. This is what develops the skill. One practice that changes everything is what we call the emotion audit. At the end of each day, you take 5 minutes. You ask yourself, what did I feel today? Not the big emotions, the small ones. When did I feel defensive? When did I feel excited? When did I feel small? When did I feel confident? You don't need to write volumes. Just notice. Did I make a decision from that emotion? Would I make a different decision if I made it again? This practice alone, done consistently, transforms your awareness in weeks, not years, weeks, because you're training your brain to notice emotional data in real time. After a few weeks of this practice, you'll start catching yourself mid-reaction. You'll feel the emotions starting to hijack you, and you'll pause. That pause is everything.
Another practice is perspective shift. When you're in conflict with someone, you pause and you ask, what is this person actually feeling right now? Not what are they saying, what are they feeling? Because usually the thing someone is angry about isn't the real issue. The real issue is underneath. Someone snaps at you about a small thing. Underneath is probably fear. Fear they're not valued. Fear they're not being heard. If you respond to the anger, you escalate. If you respond to the fear underneath, you can actually resolve it. This practice requires curiosity instead of defensiveness. It requires assuming the best instead of assuming the worst. It's harder than it sounds, but it's worth it. A third practice is intentional pausing. Before any significant decision, you pause, you breathe. You ask yourself, am I making this decision from clarity or from fear? Am I making this from my actual values or from someone else's expectations? Am I thinking clearly or am I reactive? You don't need to pause for hours. 30 seconds is enough. But that 30 seconds creates space, and in that space, different decisions are possible. Better decisions, more aligned decisions. These practices aren't complicated. They're not time-intensive. They're just consistent. 5 minutes of emotion audit, moments of perspective shift throughout the day, 30-second pauses before decisions. That's it. And yet these simple practices, done consistently, fundamentally change your life. Let me tell you what becomes possible once you integrate emotional intelligence deeply. You become someone people trust, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. You don't hide, you don't pretend. You can admit mistakes, you can ask for help. People sense that authenticity and they're drawn to it. They want to work with you, they want to build with you, they want to be around you. That's magnetic, that's rare. You become someone who can lead through chaos. Most leaders panic when things get hard. They become reactive. Their team feels that panic, and panic spreads. But a leader with emotional intelligence stays steady. That steadiness gives everyone else permission to think instead of just react. Performance improves, culture improves, results improve. You become someone who can love deeply without losing yourself. Most people either withdraw from love or lose themselves in it. With emotional intelligence, you can be fully present with another person while maintaining your own center. That's rare. That's beautiful. That's what real partnership looks like. You become someone who builds wealth not through desperation, but through alignment. You're making financial decisions from clarity. You're recognizing opportunities that fit who you actually are. You're not forcing things. You're not chasing things that don't belong to you. You're building from a place of stability, and things built from stability last. Here's what I want you to know as you finish this journey with me. You are capable of far more than you believe right now. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't a gap in intelligence or talent or luck. It's a gap in emotional awareness. That gap is closable. That gap is exactly what these 5 chapters were designed to help you close. You have everything you need inside you already. You just needed permission and a map. You have both now. The work ahead isn't dramatic. It's not exciting. It's quiet. It's daily. It's noticing. It's pausing. It's choosing differently. It's building practices that seem small but compound into enormous change. This is how real transformation happens. Not through motivation or inspiration, through consistent, small choices made from a place of awareness. I want to acknowledge something. Reading this, understanding these concepts, showing up to learn this material, that already means something about who you are. You're someone who's willing to look at themselves. You're someone who recognizes that the only thing standing between you and the life you want is you. Not circumstances, not other people, you. And you're willing to work on that. That takes courage. That takes self-honesty. That takes the very thing we've been talking about, emotional intelligence. You're already using it just by being here. The journey ahead is yours now. I've given you the foundation. I've given you the framework. I've given you the practices. But the real work, the real transformation, that's something you do. Day by day. Decision by decision, conversation by conversation. Each moment is a chance to choose differently. Each moment is a chance to act from your highest self instead of your reactive self. Each moment compounds. In 6 months, you're going to look back at this moment and you're going to be astonished at how much has changed. Not because your circumstances changed dramatically, but because you changed. You'll be making better decisions. Your relationships will be richer. Your business will be stronger. You'll feel more grounded in who you actually are. That's not a prediction. That's a promise based on what happens when people actually do this work. I'm grateful for you, for trusting me to guide you through this, for being willing to go deeper into yourself. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing a person can do. That's how you win. That's how you build something real. That's how you become the person who changes their own life, and in doing so, changes everyone around them. You've got this, and if you ever doubt that, come back to these chapters, come back to the practices, come back to the truth that's inside you, the truth that you're capable of emotional mastery, the truth that you're capable of building the life you actually want. Go forward, build something beautiful. I'll be here if you need a guide. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. Subscribe to the Millionaire Library, and if you want to go deeper, I left a full playlist waiting for you in the description.